Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. I thought I'd jump on and do a live. There's a couple of interesting things happened today that I'd like to talk about. One is the visa bulletin for DV2024 folks, the second visa bulletin of the year. That came out today. And the other thing is an email that was sent to Curtis Morrison, which clarified some points. This was an email sent from the government's lawyer and clarified a couple of points about some of the updates that we've seen in SEAC data. So that's going to be kind of interesting. And the third thing is that we've just in the last few minutes got access to the Friday night update of the SEAC data for DV2023. So I'll talk through a little bit about that as well. So I've got a number of updates for you. I'll take questions, but actually this is an odd time of day, so I think it might be good for people down under, but probably for most people in Europe and Africa and those countries, it's going to be too early. So, you know, I'm not expecting a lot of questions. But anyway, I can see I've already got a couple of questions. So let me just answer right at the beginning the normal question about DV2020 and DV2021. No news to give this week, as usual, as I've been saying for probably now a year, which is in itself staggering that it takes a year to get an answer. But there it is. There is no news about that. Okay. All right. So let me show you a couple of things. I want to present my screen and show a couple of things. Let's see, we'll do this. Firstly, let me talk about the letter that was sent to Curtis Morrison, the email, I should say. I'm hoping you can see that okay. Essentially, Curtis must have asked for clarification on a particular case. I think Curtis and a few others had been worried that they had seen cases turn to, you know, various statuses. Last updated information was updated on the SEAC database and that sort of thing. And there must have been some concern, I guess, I don't know why, but there must have been some concern that cases were being updated in SEAC. So that was one concern. And then also sort of answering a question, which I think, again, Curtis must have asked about cases that were partially through the process of visa printing. And we knew the answers to these questions, but Curtis, for whatever reason, wanted to seek clarity on them and got a statement. And the statement itself is interesting, I suppose. So, but this is no real new news. You know, if you've been listening to me in the past, you'll already know this information I'm about to give you. So the first thing is that every case has a last updated date on it. In fact, I just learned after 10 years of looking at SEAC data, I'm not sure this has always been there, but there is a last updated date on every derivative as well as on the main case itself. Zarthisius just pointed that out to me, and I had no idea. So it's quite funny. I'd always assumed that if the derivative had been updated, then the main case status would have been updated too, but that's not necessarily always the case. The main case status can have a last updated by, and the derivative has a separate last updated by field, which you can see on the SEAC system by clicking into the case numbers, the individual case numbers, the 01, which is the principal, 02, which is always the spouse, and 03 and beyond, which are the kids. And so I shouldn't say 02 is always the spouse, actually. I don't believe that's a true statement. It would be 02 would be the first derivative. But anyway, you can click on those links and you'll see the last updated date actually changes. Well, you know, that particular piece of information is not very valuable, but I never knew it. And Zarthisius kindly pointed that out to me without ridiculing me too much. So I appreciate that. Okay, so there are going to be case updated, instances after the program was stopped. It is not true to say that if your case was updated after the program was stopped, that means they're going to do something with your case. If you're in refused, you're going to stay refused. No matter how many times they update the case status, you mustn't get encouraged by the case status being updated on your case. It doesn't mean anything. It could just mean that you sent an email, for example, to the embassy, and the embassy update your case status because you sent an email, right? It doesn't mean anything about your case. It doesn't mean they're about to change your mind and issue a visa. You know, people are confused by that. And unfortunately, Curtis put out a fairly clumsy statement about this that gave that impression. And so I'm a little concerned that we've got people who now think that getting a case update might mean something positive for them. It doesn't. It doesn't mean anything at all. So, and in fact, I just checked the file, and there have been 2,000 cases within the whole database that have been updated since the program was closed. Okay, so case updates happening to files is totally normal, doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't mean you're about to get your visa if you're in refused status. So to be absolutely clear, if your case wasn't already in administrative processing, the actual status that says administrative processing, or issued status at the point of closure, then your case is over. It's done. There is no possible way you can get a visa. The second clarification that's in this note is really about those AP cases. It doesn't refer to them specifically. And again, this was slightly misinterpreted, but this is really about the cases that say the words administrative processing. We've known for some time, based on the way that this is used, probably for the last 2 or 3 years, since the SIAC information was changed a little bit, we knew that when you see administrative processing as a status on the SIAC status, it was part of the visa printing process. And so as soon as we saw at the end of the year, and let me just show you what I'm referring to here. Oh, come over. There we go. Where's my SIAC data? That's what I want to show. Okay, so as soon as we saw, and let me just wind back a little bit and show you what you would have seen at the end of the program. So I've just moved back in time on this data. At the end of the program, on the ending date, the 7th, there were 104 people from, well, I'll say 42 cases. I'm going to come back to the 42 cases in a minute. But there were 104 people whose individual cases said the words administrative processing. Those people were going to get their visas, right? That is the normal thing. Now, I'm sure that that's the normal thing. The email that Curtis received basically confirms that, and then further elaborates that actually there's been some sort of delay in the system, which I suspect is embassies just asking Washington to tell them what to do with these cases. But the email makes it clear that those cases should be issued. Okay. Now we know that actually 3 of those cases have already gone backwards. They've gone to either ready status or refused. That has happened on a couple of cases, and it does always happen. It's not completely unusual that some of those cases go backwards. They go to a revoked status. The visas would be cancelled without prejudice. It can happen in cases of fraud being discovered after the visa printing process has started, etc. So it can happen, but that's rare. My expectation is that the 104 cases, the vast majority of those will be issued. They'll turn to issued numbers. And so I always add the 104 onto the actual issued number. Okay, and that's how we knew that consular processing cases alone, without the additional adjustment of status cases of 917 cases, the consular processing cases alone had exceeded the 55,000 numbers. And then once you add in adjustment of status, you're actually over 56,000. Okay, so that is happening. This was last week's data. And if I just move the time slice now, we can see that the total here has increased by 25 numbers, and the issued administrative processing cases has dropped by 31. So 31 came off the AP side, 25 of them turned into issued. That was expected. And then there's 3 cases that account for the 6 difference. Okay, that's roughly what's happened here. The other thing I should mention is Zarthisius has modified his script slightly this week to make it more accurate. There were always a few cases which were double counted because of the way that the government updates SEAC. It was a sort of a messy update on their part, and he's now written logic to deal with that. And that has improved these numbers just a little bit, improved the accuracy of these numbers just a little bit. And so the numbers might look a little bit different to you how they stood last week, but don't worry about that. We're still in the same sort of ballpark. We don't need to worry about every finite number. Okay. So that's the updates regarding that. The other thing I wanted to update about was, let's see, visa bulletin. Let me just pull up the visa bulletin that has just been published today. So the visa bulletin has come out. It's the October. Bear in mind, this is the October visa bulletin that affects interviews in November and is published in September, because there's nothing as simple as calling your visa bulletin, 1 month, it referring to a different month and being published in yet another month, because that makes total sense. Thank you, government. That's just perfect. Nobody's confused by that at all. So anyway, so this is the October visa bulletin, as I say, referring to interviews that will happen in November. This kind of shocked a lot of people today. As we compare this month's numbers and last month's numbers, you can see that there has been absolutely no movement in Africa, both at the regional level and in the accept countries. Asia got a very small increase for Asia as a whole, and slight differences for Iran only, not for Nepal at all. Europe was increased in a very small way, and again, very small increase for Russia, not Uzbekistan. And then Oceania and South America got very small increases, right? So there have been people that had assumed that you would take the first month's visa bulletin, and let's say, just talk about Africa for a minute, that was 10,000. So the second should be 20,000, right? And then we get to 120,000 at the end of 12 months, okay? That isn't how it works. So I haven't talked very much about this for DV2024, folks, but that isn't how these visa bulletins work. I want to give a very brief explanation. I have explained this before, but I want to give a brief explanation about how this actually works, right? So if we just take Africa for a minute and ignore all the country exceptions, let's just say, for example, there are 6,000 actual cases under case number 10,000 in Africa, right? The 4,000 cases that aren't there are holes, and those holes, I've explained in the past how those holes happen, but there are only going to be, let's say, something like, and I'm just using random numbers here, I'm just guessing these numbers. Let's say there are 6,000 cases, right? Those 6,000 cases were already current in the first month, but of those 6,000 cases, only a small number, perhaps 1,000 of them or so, maybe 1,500 of them, would have had their DS260s processed. And so when you come to the second month, if you've had more cases that have their DS260 processed, then you don't necessarily need to increase the number on the visa bulletin. You can instead say, well, okay, we only gave 1,500. There only 1,500 of the 6,000 cases were ready for interview last month. We didn't even send 2NLs out to all of those 1,500 cases because some of the embassies didn't have capacity or whatever. And so we don't need to get another 1,500 cases or another 1,000 cases. We don't need to increase the numbers. The visa bulletin moves as it needs to move to reveal the numbers that it needs to reveal in order to give the capacity that they're trying to achieve. The capacity is set by the embassies, and the DS260 processing speed affects how many cases within the number range are available or ready for interview. Okay, so that's why you won't always see progression month to month on the visa bulletin. Sometimes it will stay as it has done this month. It will stay at the same number or increase just a very small amount. Okay, you should not take 1 month as being a prediction of where we're going to end up at the end. That's not how it works. And you shouldn't necessarily be running around, like headless chickens because Africa didn't increase at all. That doesn't mean that the world has ended for Africa. That's simply a reflection of the processing speed of the DS260s and the capacity of the embassies. Okay, so don't worry about it. Now we're in month 2 of 12 months. Okay, it is not necessary for everybody to freak out about, somebody who's at Africa case 12,000 needn't be running around crying this evening because they think their dream is over. We're going to get to Africa 12,000, right? It's just not going to be in November. And, so it'll be in the following month probably, and we'll get to other numbers later. So there isn't a promise in your mind or a sort of a definite sort of plan to get to 120,000 in Africa because they put the first month at 10,000. The other thing that makes this a bit confusing for people that haven't really been involved in this before is that the case density, the number of cases per thousand in the early numbers for the 3 big regions, Africa, Asia, and Europe, the case density is higher in the earlier ranges than it is in the later ranges. So you might have, as I just used an example, 6,000 cases, real cases out of the first 10,000 case numbers. If you took another 10,000 range, let's say between 100,000 and 110,000, right? That number range would probably only have 2,000 cases or 1,000 cases. It'll be a lot less cases per 1,000 at that point, right? So for 10,000 cases, it'll be a lot less. What does that mean? It means that we can see faster progression of the visa bulletin later in the program, because once some of those sort of reductions in the density of the cases happen, we can start to see numbers increasing on the visa bulletin. So those of you trying to figure this out and trying to predict what the visa bulletin is next month are dreaming, because you don't have any of the data. You don't know any of the distribution or density of the cases, and you don't have the SEAC data. So just stop trying to estimate it. I've been doing this 10 years. If I don't estimate it, I promise you can't. It just can't be done. Okay. So at the moment, you don't have the data. Now in January, we're going to have more data. Somebody asked me, by the way, what the hell's that? That's a strange thing. I don't know what that's a kind donation. I'm going to show you this in a moment. There's a kind donation there. I think that's a donation in some currency. I don't know what that means, but that's a sweet of you. I'll answer your question in a minute. It's sweet of you to donate something there, but I don't know what 1,000 squiggles is. I don't know what that is at all. Anyway, so back to the question I was about to answer. I got a good question on my blog today. Somebody asked me, and I didn't realize people didn't know. Somebody asked me, what are we going to know in January? Well, why do you keep telling people to wait until January and you'll know more in January and that sort of thing? Well, what we'll know in January, what we'll have in January is the SEAC data. We can't scrape the data for DV2024 until January the 1st. And at midnight in Mountain Time, which is in the middle of the USA, bizarrely, in sort of the same time zone as Denver, I think, Colorado, the data will become available to us for the first time, and Zarthisius will stay up in the middle of the night and scrape all this data. I'm sure he doesn't use a script to do this. I'm sure he does it live, of course. So anyway, he'll scrape the data starting at midnight on January the 1st. And then we get all the SEAC data. And the SEAC data will tell us all sorts of things. It'll tell us, for the first time, we'll know for sure the very highest case numbers that have been issued in each, not issue, I shouldn't say that, selected in each region. Okay, it'll tell us the highest case numbers. That tells us how many actual cases we have. We'll have all of the actual case number information. We won't necessarily know every derivative, but we can make some good assumptions about what's the average derivative rate per region. And if your case number is case number 20,000, you can figure out precisely at that point how many cases are in front of you, and you know the derivative rate in your region, and you can make much more sort of accurate assumptions about exactly how high your case is compared to the rest of the region. Okay, it's not like you'll be able to predict everything precisely from that point. I'm not saying that, but we'll know a lot more information than we currently know, and it'll be good information. Okay, so let me take some questions. Those were the three topics I wanted to discuss. The SEAC data that's just been made available for DV2023, the statement about DV2023 SEAC data, the clarification that Curtis received, and then the visa bulletin and my thoughts about that. Oh, let me just tie up just one last point on my thoughts about this visa bulletin. What I was trying to say was, don't worry about this visa bulletin. Don't think your case number, your dreams are over or anything else. Don't read a lot into this. There isn't a big feedback loop. For what I explained to you earlier, there needs to be kind of a feedback loop from the embassies back to the visa office in order to accurately sort of set the visa bulletin for the next month. At the beginning of the year, they don't have very much of that feedback loop yet. They have some. They know the capacity of the embassies. They can approximate the capacity, and in fact, KCC get the precise capacity. But they don't necessarily move the VB as as efficiently as they should do, perhaps in the first couple of months. And I also tend to think that if you took the whole 12 months as 12 months and divided it into quarters, so you had 3 months in each, the first 3 months of the year is not the busiest 3 months of the year. Okay, so it is not important if October, November, December we don't see a lot of activity. We want to see some. We want to see more than we saw in DV 2022, but DV 2023 had good activity in October, November, December. Pretty good activity. We'd like to see that sort of same thing again. Okay. There is something else I want to just cover for DV 2024. I made a video about this the other day, but just in case some of you didn't really understand what I was saying there. The chaos that happened right at the end of DV 2023 was very unfortunate, no doubt about it. Up until the end of August scheduling, which happened at the first few days of July, DV 2023 had been extremely well run. It was ahead of the game. They had got themselves into a position where they could issue all of the visas. And I was saying in very early July and late June, they're in a very good spot. The government have done extremely well, despite some embassies being a pain in the ass and not doing their job correctly, which really screwed up a lot of people. Despite that, KCC seemed to do a very good job in making sure they issued as many visas as they could and scheduled as many as they could up until the end of August, right? And that all happened at the end of June, beginning of July. And then in mid-July or sort of around about, the 12th of July or something, or 11th of July perhaps, we saw the new visa bulletin, and all of a sudden they started releasing more 2NLs for September, which was crazy. I think they could have scheduled 1,000 people, 500 people, just to protect against some of the 221Gs not being cleared. They could have done that, but what they actually did was they scheduled thousands of people in September, and that really caused a lot of pain and heartache, and it was very sad to see. Are they going to correct for that? I saw a video by pretty decent guy, YouTuber. He's okay. I won't mention his name, but he was talking about he assumes that the government will correct the mistakes they made at the end of DV 2023 and not do that again. I don't believe that for a minute. I think they're going to repeat the same mistakes in DV 2024. So what that means is that if you are, first of all, you need to try and get yourself scheduled earlier than September, right? We can't assume now that you've got until September 30th to get your interview. You need to get an interview before that, right? And so that means getting your DS-260 submitted. It means, making sure you understand how the embassies are doing. We'll know more about how the embassies are doing in January. It's another advantage we get from SEAC, and making some smart decisions about getting interviewed earlier, right? And for those of you listening to me or listening to other, good sources of information, you'll have that information, and hopefully you'll be able to benefit from it. But there'll be a lot of people who don't have that information, and they will just think, okay, I got an interview scheduled on September 18th, and they'll think they're safe, and they're not going to be safe, just as they weren't safe in DV 2023. Okay, and we now know, we weren't sure, but we now know they are perfectly happy to cancel interviews. Even if you've had the medical, they don't give a damn, right? They're not financially responsible. They're not morally or legally, well, they're not legally responsible. I would argue they are probably morally responsible, but they're not responsible in any way that you can sue them for. You can't recover your medical costs. If you've traveled to where the interview is going to happen, you can't recover the costs of you traveling or anything else. If they cancel the interview on the day you turn up at the interview, there's nothing you can do about it. It's tough luck. The visas are gone. They're fully exhausted. The cupboard is bare. You can't sue them to correct that, right? So, and I think that's going to happen again in DV 2024. And for me, the magic number of interviews that they should schedule is about 70,000 people, okay? Once they go over 70,000 people by any appreciable amount of interviews, that is in a risky danger area for those latest interviews. And that's precisely what they did. And I had talked about this during DV 2023. Earlier on, I had said several times 70,000 is the number, and they managed to screw it up. So, so there you go. Let's hope they don't do that again, but I think they will. Okay, so let me see if I can answer this. So living in Japan now, so I guess that's 1,000 yen. Thank you for that. Don't know what that's worth. Got the case number EU 342,000, 34,200. That means roughly. Will relocate to Taiwan in February. Unlocking and changing address and interview location won't affect anything. Does my CN have any chances? Okay, two questions there. The first thing is, does unlocking and changing address affect you? No, it doesn't. Unlocking doesn't automatically delay cases. It doesn't. I know some people don't agree with me. Those people are idiots, frankly, because they just are ignoring all the evidence that we have, and we have plenty of evidence. We know the situation. So you can unlock a case and do something like change an address, and that isn't going to delay you. If you unlock a case because you've got married and you've just added a derivative, and your derivative that you're adding is a man from Iran, yeah, that's going to delay your case because they're going to do some background checking on that guy, right? So I'm not saying it never causes a delay, but I'm saying that in the main, just by unlocking a case, it doesn't cause a delay. Okay, so so that's the first question. Does your case number have any chances? Well, case numbers in EU are a lot higher than your number this year, and case numbers went to 32,000 in DV23. However, EU and Asia and Oceania and South America all got a little benefit from Africa. They got a little bit of a redistribution, reallocation of visas, about 4,000 visas. So if that happens again, then EU could go to that sort of level, right? But again, even at EU 32,000, there were people there that were scheduled for interview and lost out. Okay, so I struggle to say you're safe. I'm not going to say you're safe at 34,000. We'll know more in January, but it doesn't sound too bad a number right now. Okay. All right. And thanks for that donation. I'll go and buy a cup of coffee or whatever. That's nice of you. Okay. Let me scroll back up so I can take a couple of these questions and see if I can find some interesting ones. I like clicking on these happy messages. DV2020 winner in the USA because of you. That's kind of you to say, but welcome to the USA. Been here 3 years now, I guess, or 2 years at least. So I hope everything's going well for you. Can we apply again and get a chance to get the green card again if we got it in DV2020 and DV2021 or no hope? You can apply every time. So even if you're a DV2024 winner, I would say apply again when the lottery opens on October the 4th, right? There's no harm to apply again. It won't affect your case on DV2024 at all. And if you're a DV2020 and you lost out, or a 21, yeah, go ahead and apply. Why not? It's another chance, right? So yes, you can do that, no problem. As usual, I'd like to hear I jump online. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. I wish to know if it's okay for an applicant to indicate on his DS260 that he was assisted by his brother to complete his DS260. No problem at all. It doesn't matter if you were assisted. I generally wouldn't do that because even if somebody assists you to do the DV lottery form, the entry, or the DS260, you are responsible for whatever is on your form. Just because somebody else helped you doesn't mean that you can blame that other person if there's a mistake on your form. You're responsible. So there's no harm in saying that your brother, helped you. There's no harm in that, but there's no advantage either. You've got to know what's on your DS260. Okay. Africa's cutoff hasn't changed in November. Yep, I've talked about that. Oceania moves from 225 to 300. My case number is 1800. When's it going to be go up to about 2000? So Oceania went up to 2500 in DV 2023, but there are 77% more selectees in DV 2024 than there were in 23 for Oceania. It's a bananas nuts number. And so the very high case numbers that we're hearing are frankly going to be out of luck. Okay. However, your number is at 1800. That's in the range of cases that were current. But again, the big increase in numbers for DV 2023 for Oceania happened at the last minute in the last month. And only one Tuesday happened. And I talk about Tuesdays because of Sydney, but Oceania is more than just Tuesdays, obviously. But only the first few days of the month were able to get interviews, right? So that final increase that Oceania had didn't benefit Oceania as much as it was supposed to. It was a bit unfortunate. But so there is some risk for your case number. It's not 100% certain that would get current, even though it would have been current in 2023. But the Oceania numbers are roughly the same as last year, number for number. And we'll see that a little bit more clearly when we got the numbers, when we got the data in January. Okay. Okay, next question. Case number is 2024 AS 21000 from Bhutan. Is there any chance to get an interview? How is Sydney Embassy performing? Sydney Embassy is one of my favorites. They did a shitty thing for a few months in DV 2022, I think it was. And Jesse had to sue them. And by suing them, frankly, got Fiji's attention, and Fiji were amazing and helped out. But Sydney did a pretty unforgivable thing. However, normally I'm pretty comfortable with Sydney as an embassy. Your number, AS 21000, is probably okay. It is less in comparison to last year's, but again, we don't have the exact data, and we'll have that in January. I can tell you clearly won't be current before January, so you've got time to wait. And we'll know more in January. So I would suggest about your number that you just wait and see what we find out in January. Okay. Please, I'm DV 2024. Case number is 69,000 in Africa. Really want to know if I have a high case number, any chance for me, or should I consider not having hope? 69,000 is probably not that high. There is a thing that happens. So the number of selectees for 24 versus 23 in Africa have increased by about 10%, 12%, about 5 or 6,000. So instead of 50,000 or 49,000 or something, it's now 55,000, right? That sounds terrible, but every one of the case numbers in Africa in DV 2023 went current. And even though every one of them went current, the government were not able to give out enough visas to everyone. Now, the reason that happened was because of embassies, some embassies being bad. So, for example, Cairo embassy had its own 5,500 Egyptian cases or people, and it also was responsible for processing Sudan, which is 4,800 people in DV 2023. So over 10,000 people were connected to Cairo embassy. Cairo didn't do enough damn work, and so I think they actually got 3,700 people scheduled for interview. That's not enough. That's not a good performance. They should have done more, right? And because of their bad behavior, that affected, therefore, about 7,000 people. 7,000 people or 6,500 people lost their chance just in Cairo. That's one embassy, right? Then we look at Nairobi, same sort of thing. It's got Eritrea supposed to go there, South Sudan, who else? Can't remember who else. But also the local applicants, right? And so Nairobi was responsible for over 5,500 cases or people, and again failed to live up to their job, right? They didn't do their job right. They didn't do enough, and so that costs thousands of people their visas. Stupid Poppy is like barking at something, probably an Amazon delivery. Sorry about that. But anyway, you can see the point about Nairobi, right? Same thing in Accra. Accra didn't do enough, and so on and so forth. There are various embassies that behaved badly. Those badly behaving embassies, generally speaking, were in Africa. Most of the bad behaving embassies were in Africa. Africa was much more affected than anyone else. So if those embassies or other embassies, or if we have embassies in Africa who behave badly again, it ruins the chances for thousands of people. And so of those 55,000 people, some of them will just lose their chance, right? Which is good news for high case numbers in other African countries. Now, it's a brutal, horrible way to look at it, but that's the reality of the situation. So your case number isn't particularly high at 69,000, but if your case number 120,000, you kind of want other countries to not, for their embassies to not do very well. If you're sitting in Johannesburg, for example, and Joburg is doing pretty well, you might think, okay, well, I'm happy that Cairo is not behaving well. I'm happy that Nairobi is not behaving well, right? It's a bit brutal, but that's kind of what happens, right? KCC don't give a damn which countries get the visas. They're just stuffing out appointments as much as they can. If the embassy will take appointments, they're putting appointments in there. The government don't care about the individuals. They don't care about who wants it most. They don't care about trying to be fair to people in Nairobi or people in Egypt. They don't care about that. They're just looking at pushing out the quota for each region. Okay, so we could see Africa go current if embassies misbehave, right? Which would be a stunning prospect to see. The highest case number I know of in Africa at the moment is 122,000. It's probably going to be higher than that. But for me to say that could go current, it sounds ridiculous, but it could go current if embassies misbehave. If embassies all start working properly, then yeah, case number AF 122,000 hasn't got a chance. In that scenario, your number might be a little bit more risky, but not totally risky at 69,000. So sorry for the long-winded explanation there. I think it needs to be sort of explained a little bit that Africa is very important for its own behavior, or the embassies in Africa is very important for its own visa bulletin behavior. And then, of course, it will affect the rest of the world as well, because about 4,000 visas were underused in Africa and redistributed to EU, Asia, South America, and Oceania. For example, Asia received over 9,500 visas. Their quota is only 8,500 or so, 8,600. So they got more visas than they were entitled to according to their quota. Those extra visas came from Africa. They came from Africa because Africa underfilled. They underfilled because of the bad embassies, right? You get the chain of events I'm trying to say. So if the embassies in Africa behave well, then all sorts of other effects will happen. We'll see lower case numbers getting current in Africa. We'll see lower case numbers getting current in Asia, Europe, South America, and Oceania, because those, because the visas would go out to Africans according to the quotas, as they should do, right? And they would not then be redistributed to other regions. So don't think that you can just focus on your own region. You have to sort of understand a little bit about what's going on with other regions. Very, very complex to see how this is all going to play out over the coming months, okay? Which again is another good reason to try not, don't try and predict things too much, okay? Why is the visa bulletin not published yet? It is. It was published a few hours ago. It's usually published between the 8th and the 15th of the month. At around about noon today, my time, it was published. No, earlier than that. I think about 10:30 my time, which would have been evening time in some parts of the world. But of course, that's only like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in KCC, right? So, in other words, it's published on American time, not on the time zone where you are, right? Necessarily. Is it true that DV2023 is in halt? Yes, DV2023 has ended. If you haven't been issued yet, or if your case doesn't at least say administrative processing in SEAC, then your DV2023 journey is over. There's no negotiating that. There's no doubt about that. There's no way to sue. There's no chance that some embassy is going to start issuing visas. There was some idiot that was saying Nairobi is suddenly going to send 400 interviews out or some ridiculous thing, or was suddenly going to issue a bunch of visas. I mean, just stupid, cruel statements to be making in public based on absolutely no information, just made up nonsense. And it's not going to happen. There's not going to be that sort of event. There are no more visas left. They actually issued 56,000 visas already. So there are none left, okay? Because they're only supposed to have stopped at 55,000. They went too high. Okay. AS region 2024, 17,000 from Burma. Really want to know if I have a high case number, any chance for me, or I should not consider having hope. Okay, so it's not a particularly high number. And what will make the difference in Asia is Iran and Nepal. Iran and Nepal, between them, take around about 80% of the selectees, the selectee numbers. If you look at Asia as a whole, about 80% of them are those two countries, and they're concentrated in the early number ranges, right? So I don't know how the distribution of Nepal and Iran will be in terms of case numbers. We'll only know that in January. Okay, so you have a chance. You have a pretty good chance, I'd say, because your number is not that high. But we'll only know more in January. Okay. Watched your live about a year ago as a DV2023 winner. Thanks for pointing me towards Someone's Mum forum. Went through AS, received the green card a month ago. Now residing in Florida. Fantastic. I'm not going to tease you about living in Florida. I hate the politics there, but I used to live there myself. I love the state. There's a lot of good stuff about it. So I understand why you're in Florida. And congratulations on getting a green card. And hats off to Someone's Mum. She's been doing this longer than I have. She's been helping people on the DV lottery since she was a DV 2013 winner. I've met her personally. She's a fantastic lady, very intelligent, and has been helping people for over 10 years, longer than I have. I actually got help from her going through my own process. So if you're doing adjustment to status, she knows DV lottery very, very well as I do. She doesn't get involved in the numbers and the CAC data and all of that sort of thing. She doesn't get involved. But in terms of the law, particularly as it relates to adjustment of status, she is easily as knowledgeable as me, and much more so on adjustment of status. So she's a great resource for people that need that sort of help. So yeah, love her to death. And I miss Susie. I miss Susie Q. She's another lady in that same forum. Again, someone that I know personally. And she got, frankly, fed up with some of the negativity we receive, and so stopped helping out in that forum. I think, frankly, because of the negativity. And there were probably other reasons. She had her own personal reasons. But she also was is extremely knowledgeable about this process, also as a DV 2013 winner, and had helped for years and years and years, and has stopped over the last year. And so, I miss her input on things too. But there you go. Somebody coming, Kavindo, you're coming to New York last month. Awesome. Marek, another extremely smart guy who helps out on DV lottery questions, also is in New York, so it's a good place. Mohammed says, did pay visa for Iran, knew some cases from Iran where location have interview. I don't understand the question, I'm afraid. It's always so at the beginning of the year. Correct, Adnan, that's right. I'm told that visas for 23 is exhausted. They're not issuing visas anymore. How true is that? It's 100% true. It's Japanese yen. Thank you, TK's work. I appreciate it. I like what you're using to record the live video. Please, what software is that? I use StreamYard. You pay for the service. Unfortunately, it only works in 720p mode. It doesn't do the full 1080, which is annoying. My camera can do the 1080, so it does affect the quality. But that's the only downside of it. I've done that one, answered that one already. Do you know if there's been any more information about why the number of Oceania selectees has been so high in 2024? Josh, we're not going to be told that. We'll never be told that. They've over-selected. I know it's massively over-selected. There is no good reason for that. It's not like maybe they know something. Like, please don't go with that sort of theory. The reality is they've effed up, as you would say, down under. They have messed up. And it's not going to end well. They've selected 77% more people than were selected in DV 2023, and they didn't go current in DV 2023, and they didn't even satisfy all the cases they needed to satisfy under the 2500 number. So in other words, DV 2023 was more selectees than they needed, and they've increased that number by 77% in DV 2024. That can only lead to bad things, right? High case numbers won't get a chance. That's just the way it is. But we don't know why. We don't know why they do it. There was a thing published this week about which justified why they went over 55,000, and in that justification, they say they're allowed to use their own estimations, or they're allowed to make estimations, and they're allowed to rely on those estimations when it comes to issuance of visas, right? Now, that's kind of a bananas situation, but it shows their attitude towards this. They're allowed, in other words, to just make guesstimates, right? They don't have to be scientific. I remember a conversation I had with Greg, one of the lawyers, one of the great lawyers, and Greg was convinced, probably like you are, that there's some reasoning behind the way they select cases. And I said to him, I remember saying to him very clearly, there's no logic to it. It's not like they know something. They just over-select. It is as cruel as it sounds. It's as stupid as it sounds. It is. It just is. I don't know why they've selected 140,000 people when absolute chaos has just happened with 119,000 people in DV 2023, right? And when they only need to schedule 70,000 people, why would they Why would they invite 140,000 people? So it doesn't make sense. So half of the people are not going to get an interview at all, and about 85,000 of the selectees are not going to get a visa. Right, so more than half of the selectees are not going to get a visa. So DV 2024 is going to be tough. I can tell you that it's going to be a tough year. Issued on the 6th of September. That's awesome. Was on 221G for DNA. Finally have my visas. Wow, that's awesome. You were in the last couple of hundred people that got their visas. If you'd have been issued, if they'd have tried to issue you a day later, you would have missed out. So that's a very valuable green card you've got there. And I hope you make the most of it. Perhaps your kid will go on to be a president in the USA or something. Make the most of it. Georgia, how you doing? Should DV 2023 people be concerned if we're still in AP? Oh, Georgia, I'm sorry. If it's not clear already, not only should you be concerned, but you should be coming to terms with the fact, accepting the fact that you're not going to get your visa. Oh, let me just qualify that. When you say an AP, I'm assuming you mean 221G. If you mean your SEAC status says administrative processing, then you will get your visa issued 99% of the time, right? If, on the other hand, you're in AP, meaning 221G, your SEAC status says refused, but with the long text, then you will not, 100% certain, you will not get your visa. There is no way. All the visas are gone. So I hope that's clear. I'm sorry you didn't make it, Georgia. I remember speaking to you several times over this year. It's frustrating as hell. I think you were in that last group of people made current. Frustrating. Or maybe you were from before that. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, what happened? Some visas from Iran. What do people for interview? Mohammed, I can't understand what you're trying to ask there. Sudhir, they did not done all visa bulletin for Nepal. Why they did? Okay, they didn't move the visa bulletin for Nepal. Is that what you're saying? That's true. They didn't move it. It's for the reason I explained earlier. It's all to do with in your case about Nepal. It's to do with Kathmandu, the embassy in Kathmandu, setting their capacity, and how many people below that case number are already already ready for interview. They didn't need any more. Between either the capacity or the number of people being ready for interview based on DS260 processing, they didn't need any more people. That's all it is. But don't worry about it. There'll be another chance next month. And this is only visa bulletin number 2 of 12. So no need to worry about that. Headless chicken here for a tech pirate. Feels like headless chicken when visa bulletin doesn't get updated. I know, but I say every month it's between the 8th and the 15th. And then already on the people are freaking out on the 14th, like headless chickens, freaking out on the 12th. And then halfway through the day, on the 15th, they're freaking out on the 15th as well. Now, we have seen visa bulletins released much later than 15th, but I did say last week it'll be between the 8th and the 15th, just like always, and it was. So, I don't know. Adventurous Philent says, it says in the form that the number of people who won the lottery is more than the number of visas that will be issued, so you have to fill in the DS260 form immediately if you win. That's true. It does, in your selection letter, it makes clear that many more people have been selected than there are visas available. Okay, so it should not be a surprise to you that someone is going to miss out. Okay, don't let the missing out people include you. So Soothing says, my first name is Anas. Do you think I might get bullied in the US because of it? Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Marek's got another. Marek's going to have another meme here. I've had enough sun in Africa. How's life in Alaska? Okay, Anas. I don't know what to say about your name. You're not going to get bullied if you're not in school, okay? It's only going to be someone childish like me that's going to make fun of your name, right? But nobody's going to make fun of your name in normal business scenarios, at work, etc. They're not going to make fun of your name. There's lots of very strange names here, I have to say. I mean, we've got a very diverse society, and there's some people in America who make up completely stupid sounding names. So your name is not sort of sillier than theirs. In terms of moving to Alaska, well, you might want to go to Alaska if you're really worried about being bullied, because you won't see anyone, right? I mean, literally, you can be days away from someone in Alaska. It's horrible weather. The economy is brutal. You won't see anyone. There's no big cities of any note whatsoever. The biggest cities are like a rundown shanty town. Completely pointless. But if you want to be in Alaska because you like the countryside and snow and ice and horrible weather, and you want to risk being eaten by a bear, if that sounds like fun to you, then yeah, great. You won't be bullied about your name, at least. That might be a good idea. Good luck, so soothing. I hope you're kidding with all this, but anyway, we'll see. You're welcome, DK Works. Thanks for the support. Asia 26,000, currently living in the US. I put a hold on my NIW EB2 application process a couple of months ago. Why did you put a hold? I don't think I would have put a hold if I were you. Waiting to assess my chance on January once the numbers are released. Okay, yeah, I mean, it sort of makes sense, but I don't think I'd have done it the same way, to be honest. I winner 2018. Thanks. Me apply for citizenship. US Bravo. USA users. US. Mohammed, I think that's the third message I've read from you, and I haven't understood a single one of them. So I'm sorry, Mohammed. I'm just not tuned into whatever it is you're saying. Santa Claus sends me a £1.99. £1.99. What can I get with £1.99? I could get. I could go to, what's that bakery in the UK? Greg's the Bakers or something. I could go and get a couple of sausage rolls with that, couldn't I? That's very nice of you. Thank you. Case number EU 62,000 something. Not much chance is right. Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. It's going to be very hard for them to get to your case number, I think, in EU. There's not much that will go wrong. I mean, there's a couple of embassies that will misbehave a little bit in Europe, but generally speaking, yeah, it's not going to work. So I'm afraid, Santa Claus, I mean, hang around for the next few months by all means. But I don't think it's going to work out very well for you, to be honest. And so do enter 2025. Okay. So all the cases scheduled for interview this September are of no use after the 6th. That's correct. What about those who haven't received any letter of cancellation of the September interview? What advice do you have? Yeah, there's been public notices. They don't have to send you. It's not a requirement that the embassy sends you a cancellation letter. You can choose to turn up at the embassy if you want, but you'll be wasting your time. They won't accept your money. They probably won't even let you in for your interview. But they certainly won't begin to process you or anything like that. There's been statements about this on travel.state.gov. It's official information, and we have all the data. We can show you why they've stopped the program, because they've issued all the visas, right? So nothing's going to change, whether they send you a cancellation notice or not. So it seems like you don't believe what you're hearing, but I'm sorry, you're going to have to come to terms with it. Any hope for 2023? SEAC data shows ready. No hope. SEAC data showing ready means you were scheduled, probably in September, but there's no possibility of you being issued. It can't be. Did I? I've just seen a note from Zarthisius. Oh, shoot. I gave away a secret, apparently. Oh dear, I'm having a fun time this evening. But apparently I gave away a little bit of a secret. I won't say what it is. Considering the number of selectees, do you think AS406? What is that? AS406 is. You're saying 406,000. I know it's not that. It's probably 40,600 is what you're probably trying to say. And in Asia region, I don't know whether that's going to get current or not. It's quite a high number. It's one of the highest. So it's risky for sure, but we'll see how risky it is in January. Okay. I got to answer this one. Sexist lad in Riverland. What a great name. How is case number OC1300 looking for DV2024? This increase in Oceania cases got me nervous. Your number is probably going to be okay. It's very unlikely that they can issue all of the visas that they have, which is a quota of about 850, I think it is, in Oceania. Very unlikely they can issue all of those before Oceania 1300. So you're probably pretty safe. You don't need to worry. 2020 from Africa in Mexico. Now, if I enter by non-official checkpoint, oh my God, don't do that. And apply for asylum. Will that compromise my chance if they issue visa? It will be possible to do adjustment status. So this is a heartbreaking, message there. I don't like to hear of people taking the risky journey. I understand why some people do it. I understand for some people they have no choice, but it's a risky journey, right? So, I'd hate to sort of advise someone, go ahead and do that journey. I certainly wouldn't advise that. Now, in terms of, do you have a valid reason to apply for asylum? I don't know whether you do or don't. I mean, you could speak to a lawyer and see, what your situation is. Is it possible to do adjustment of status? Well, for a number of years, it was possible to do a DV lottery adjustment of status based on asylum. But just in the last year or so, I've seen some people being denied because they were on some sort of status with asylum. Now, I'm not an expert on adjustment of status, and I don't really understand the technicalities of when it is or isn't a good situation. And so, again, I would speak to either a lawyer or someone's mum in the immigration forum. I think it's forums.immigration.com. And there is a username or a person with a username where it's someone's mum, and she is an expert in adjustment of status for DV lottery. You could ask her. But understand this. Investigations that you make towards immigration need to be done carefully, anonymously, because you don't want to create the impression that you have immigrant intent or that you started a process prior to entry into the USA, which, you don't want to put yourself into a bad position. And then, maybe you get a DV 2020 chance, maybe you don't. But if you have a valid reason for claiming asylum, then you can get a pretty nice status through asylum. It takes a lot of years. It's hard. It's not an easy process at all, but it is possible. It's a possible process depending on why you're claiming asylum. You've got to have a good reason. It can't be a just made up reason. It has to be real. Eric says, your videos are great for me. DV 2023 AF 18,000 currently in New York. Made it. That's great. Welcome to you and your wife. That's awesome. 1,000 yen is $6 to $7. Wow, that's a lot of money. Thank you. People don't need to donate money to me. I don't do any of this for money. I have a full-time job. I'm very well paid in my full-time job. This is not an income-producing thing for me. I do have some expenses. I make some advertising revenue from my YouTube account, and I use that to pay my expenses of my BritSimon blog hosting and that sort of thing. That I have a little bit of expenses on that, and so it offsets. and I get a little bit of, in the past, I've had some very kind donations, which I've always funneled towards my daughter, Sophia, because that actually was a treehouse thing. You can read my blog to understand what I'm talking about. But my daughter and I have enjoyed some nice experiences with that. So, I'm grateful for all of those things. Thank you. That's kind of you, but don't feel obliged or obligated to do that by any means. Okay, next. Right, I'm going to take just a couple more questions because it's over an hour now. I was 2023 AF, 58,000 was scheduled, exhausted my money to do passport, oh my God, and medicals, just later to have the interview cancelled. Went to the medical center, was refused refund of the money. Yeah, of course, they're not going to refund your money. They had performed the service that you paid for, even though the reason why you wanted that medical was only for the interview. The physician is a third party from the embassy, and they're not going to give you your money back. They did the medical. So, as brutal as it is, it's right that they didn't give you the money back. But yeah, you've incurred significant costs. I did speak to Jesse the other day to see if any of these cases where people had spent money on medicals and travel and everything else like you have spent, to see whether any of those costs could be claimed, refunded, sued for. And basically the answer is no, it can't be. It's partly a question of how much money do you spend on trying to recover hundreds of dollars, even $1,000. You might spend thousands of dollars trying to recover that small amount of money. But it's also the problem I just explained. The medical was performed by someone who performed that service and therefore is entitled to be paid. If you've traveled to the country for the interview, that's not something the embassy are responsible for. Even if you've paid your money for the fees at the embassy and then have been turned down, they're not going to refund that money. They're not obliged to refund that money. They explain very carefully that it's non-refundable. And as it was put to me, you pay for the chance, not for the certainty of the, you're not paying for a visa. You're paying for the chance to get a visa, nothing more. And sometimes people don't get those visas, but they still pay anyway. So unfortunately, no, you've got no comeback for that. It's very hard, I know. And in some cases, people have spent, large amounts of money compared to the average earnings in their countries. Terrible. I've answered this question already, but I want to say it again. My brother was selected for DV24. Can he apply for 25 or will he be disqualified? He will not be disqualified by applying for another year. It's totally okay. Right, let me just see. Oh, this is a great question to end on. What is the US government doing to solve the problem of bad embassies in Africa? I think is race. I think you're saying racist. I always hate that that concept. Because if the diplomats in Africa are transferred to the EU, they will work hard to meet up. Right. I don't agree for 1 second that it's racism. To throw a charge of racism at a process which is about diversity is just fundamentally a stupid idea, right? It's not racism if you're trying to help people from 150 countries around the world, right? And just because something doesn't work for you or for people of a certain region or whatever, you can't claim racism, okay? So it's not racism. Now, it is annoying and it is wrong that some embassies are allowed to just behave as they want. But the government have addressed this in various lawsuits. They have talked about why they're unable to control the embassies in any centralized way. They can advise embassies what to do. They can encourage them. But ultimately, the control of an embassy is to do with the ambassador and the administration locally within that embassy. They are little fiefdoms, if you like, little kingdoms. They are entitled to do what they want. So if they have decided to prioritize one type of case to the detriment of DV lottery, that is their choice. We can't do anything about that. They can't be sued for that decision. and they can't be told by the government that they're wrong. So it's frustrating as all hell. And I wish we could correct it, but we can't. And it's not racism. I hope you understand that. Okay. Oh, here we go. You tugged on my heartstrings. Please answer my question, Simon. It's critical. I don't want to make the wrong decision. Which question? This one. In Mexico. Oh, I did answer that one. Great. Good. I just saw that one. Saw that question, but I have answered it. Okay. I'm going to call that a day. I need to go and do something with and take my daughter out for a quick bite to eat, I think. Thanks for joining me this evening. I hope this particular video is interesting and helpful. To those people that I've revealed a secret about, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Love you guys. And to everybody else, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out my blog at BritSimonSays.com. You can ask questions at BritSimonSays.com and I will answer them there. And I'll see you in a few days' time for another video. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.